Hey everyone, and welcome back to Whiskey Trek. I'm Jackson, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We're talking about ryes in cocktails. Insert the video and music intro we don't have. So, if anyone wants to design one for us, that'd be cool. Today, what we're going to talk about is when it's appropriate to use a rye in a cocktail. And that's a little bit of a tricky question because technically, the answer is always and never, because it's totally dependent on what you want, right? So, for instance, today we're going to be making an old-fashioned. So, while I talk about rye in a cocktail, I'm going to make an old-fashioned. First, we have to start out with, what rye do I want to use? Now, I've got a little bit of a different selection here, right? We've got our two Kentucky ryes, low rye content. You know, this is 65% rye, and this is probably around the 51 to 60% rye content for Sazerac rye. And honestly, my go-to cocktail rye is Sazerac rye. It's not your spiciest rye. It's fruity, and it's just really nice, and 90 proof is a pretty good proof for making cocktails. You could also go with something like a MGP rye. The 95.5 mash bill works really well in cocktails. It really makes that rye spice stand out. And it also brings with it a lot of citrus. And then you got stuff like Virtue or Evernorth Spirits, who are making interesting single barrels or batches of rye that are from all over the place. This one happens to be MGP rye, but they've also got a lot of rye coming from Sagamore. So you're getting a lot of variety of ryes to choose from. And first, let me just say, if you're going to make cocktails with rye, I would stick away from barrel proof when making rye cocktails. As good as this is, I think it's just going to be too powerful for a cocktail, and you want your cocktails to be a little bit more balanced. So we'll go ahead and move this Virtue Essence single barrel off the table, even though it's really pretty. And now you got to decide what you're going to choose. For me, I usually go Sazerac, like I said, but I think I'm going to go with the Old Forester today. Something a little bit more sweet, maybe a little bit spearminty rather than the traditional citrus, rye spice, and fruit notes you get from the Sazerac. So, obviously, you can choose between bourbon or rye anytime you're making any cocktail that requires whiskey. I prefer to use rye when I'm making my old fashions because it brings that extra added spice and maybe a little bit more definition apart from the simple syrup. But when you're looking for a really sweet cocktail, like maybe a Gold Rush or something like that requires it to be like a sweet honey forward something, then I would probably lean towards bourbon. But here today, old fashioned, I prefer to use rye. So I'm going to use a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup because I don't like my cocktails to be sweet. And that's one of the reasons why I choose rye when making my old fashions. So we got 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, 3 dashes of Angostura bitters. We're going to do 2 and a 1/2 ounce of rye whiskey because I like my pours to be heavy. You might be a little bit different, but we'll see. So now that we've got all that, let's give it a little stir. One of the reasons that I really like rye in cocktails is because you do get rid of that sweeter factor from most bourbons. You add in more opportunities for citrus notes to come through, which is great when you're making an old-fashioned with oranges or whiskey sours with your lemon. I prefer to use ryes when I make whiskey sours, specific ryes, like Sazerac rye is a great rye for a whiskey sour. Those added fruit notes really bring something to the table. But if you go with something more barrel proof, more spice forward, I think it might mess up the balance there. So you got to be careful when choosing what rye you're going to use. It's a tricky subject because ryes can be really overpowering in some areas, and you don't want to upset the balance there. So that is why most people lean bourbon when making cocktails. I've got our glass and a big old sphere of ice, which I always recommend over just normal ice cubes. Pour that right in there. Take our orange. Get a nice peel going. Ooh, that was great. Look at that. Express it over. I always like to add a little bit of a rim as well. You get that orange right on there and then drop it right in. Optional things you can add. Luxardo cherries are fantastic. I don't recommend maraschino cherries. They're too sweet, too bright. Luxardo cherries are fantastic in this. I do typically add a little, like maybe a quarter of a bar spoon of the Luxardo syrup instead of simple syrup. You can also cut your simple syrup in half and add a touch of the Luxardo syrup as well as, and you get more of that dark, rich cherry notes, which would be great here. But I wanted to make a more traditional old-fashioned for you guys. So let's go ahead and see how it turned out. I've never used Old Forester 100 proof in a cocktail before, so let's see what that turns out compared to Sazerac. Obviously, up front, all you're going to get is orange. I just expressed this orange. I just rimmed it on the glass, so let's go ahead and have a taste. That is delicious. The 100 proof really adds something. You get more of the whiskey flavors. The rye brings the spice, but also because this rye is just such a sweet bourbon drinker's rye, you get so many bourbon notes on here, toasted marshmallow and all of those wonderful notes. I think if you go with a higher content rye than Old Forester, you're going to get more of the traditional rye notes. But this Old Forester is a great introduction for bourbon drinkers into rye. And if you are averse to drinking rye by itself, it works great in a cocktail. And I definitely suggest trying it out. Let me know what ryes you guys use in cocktails. What cocktails do you make ryes with? Or what cocktails should I be using rye in that I'm not? Traditionally, I just make whiskey sours and old fashions. So let me know what you guys think. This was delicious, and I'm really, really pleased, actually. So let me know in the comments below. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.